Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good night, depending on when and where you are watching this session. This session is about managing AVD the modern way. Before we start, I would like to thank Dwayne for organizing this event. It's a great pleasure to be here together with Sander, and let's get started.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my name is Sander. Full name Sander Rozemuller. I come from a fairly small town called Geerdijk. It's in the east of the Netherlands. With my wife and two kids. Not two wives and one kid. One wife and two kids. I'm a cloud developer at Unica ICT Solutions. I have a very strong focus on automation for deploying and managing Azure resources, but also on the mobile and enterprise management side. Also, we're working on front end, so we will our life will make a lot easier at all. Well, the main techniques I use is Powershell and DevOps, but also we are using the common templates like RM or Bicep. Beside work, I also write some blogs about deploying and managing Azure Virtual Desktop environments, also for Microsoft Endpoint Management. And I also like to try new techniques like REST API, Bicep in combination with other various deployment strategies. That's also the way of the start of something great for me, because it is I wrote the AVD automation cocktail, where I describe all the different strategies and pros and cons about it. Well, I'm also a great part of a leader group of the Dutch AVD user group. Together with Stefan, we provide a stage for people where what keeps them busy, and they will show that on that stage in relation to a virtual desktop subject. Beside work, I also be a little bit sportive, so you can find me on the athletics track. Also have some quality time with family and supporting our children at sport fields. And at last, I became a Microsoft MVP this September in the enterprise mobility, so I'm very happy with that. And well, I'm very pleased to be part of this session, and well, let's get started.
Cool, nice Sander. So, my name is Stefan Dingemanse, 32 years young. I'm from the Netherlands. I work as a consultant at Veerman ICT, and I am mainly focusing on application and desktop delivery in the cloud. So I mainly focus on things like Microsoft 365, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, SCCM, AVD, WVD. And like Sander, I'm also a Microsoft MVP, and I'm also the co-founder of the WVD, or as we now call it, AVD community, and also the Dutch AVD user group. Well, you can find me on Twitter. I have my own blog post where I try to put out some blogs. It's been quite quiet because we are expecting a little girl, so very busy with preparing all the things for that one. But if I have enough time, I will definitely continue blogging. So let's get started. The main reason why we're all here is to learn something. The session is part of the Azure Back to School, and what Sander and I want to show you today is how you can and should enroll a virtual desktop session host, and how you can manage it with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So let's get started with the agenda for this session.
Yeah, okay. Well, for you, we prepared a small agenda. We split our whole session into, well, two main parts. One part with some theories about Azure Virtual Desktop, some day join, and how to enroll in Intune. The second part, also the most fun part, we both think it's the most fun. It's the demos. We prepared some demos for you. So we will show the what's managed and what is not managed and how to deploy it, and at some really simple examples. At last, we will use our experience to learn you about some known issues, and at the end we have a little recap about what you have seen on this session. And after all that information, we give you a little startup, where to start reading and finding the blogs, etc. So, well, let's start with part one, Azure Virtual Desktop.
Yep.
Okay. Well, what is Azure Virtual Desktop? Actually, it's a relative new service within Azure. It's on the public cloud, of course, and what it does is it's providing a full desktop or app virtualization. And well, you have two different type of environments. Well, one is the multi-session and one is the personal. Where the multi-session is you're sharing one host with multiple users, and the personal one is you all have one single user per host. In this whole session, we are focusing on the personal side. So we are testing with two different users. One is managed, one is not managed, and it's all on the personal side. Well, Microsoft says you also have the possibility to bring your own image. Well, you have to imagine that you have one session host where the users are connecting to. And we have Microsoft has provided some base images, and you're also allowed to put your own image in it. Good to know, it must be a Windows image, so Linux isn't supported yet. Well, there is something to tell about the difference between a traditional environment and a non-traditional. Well, AVD is not traditional, it's quite new. What's the advantage about AVD in relation to the traditional, like Citrix with provisioning service, for example? Well, for Citrix you have to maintain also a gateway server, broker server, a web page where users are connecting to, logging in, all the authentication, MFA, that kind of stuff. For Azure Virtual Desktop, it's all the responsibility for Microsoft. So the only thing for AVD what you have to do is take care about the session host, the good permissions, the publishing of the desktop groups, that kind of resources. So no issues with the gateway service, etc. It also has some requirements, of course. First of all, you need a license of Microsoft 365 license. There are all bunch available. I noticed here the most common one. What I said, you have to be, if you provide your own image, then make sure it's a Windows image. And the last but very important one is that you have to need an Active Directory domain. So it doesn't matter if it's on-premise AD or it's an Azure AD, but you have to need one. And that's the part where Stefan going to tell you about more about the subject.
Yep. So this was just a quick introduction of AVD, but I think the guys or women who are watching this session already know AVD. But what we are going to talk about today is if you want to manage those AVD session hosts with Microsoft Endpoint Manager, what do we need and how do we do it? So let's start with the first step. The first step is the hybrid Azure AD join. What is Azure hybrid, or what is hybrid Azure AD join? So when you configure a device to be hybrid domain joined, what it basically is the session host is being domain joined to your traditional on-premises in the cloud Active Directory, and it's also being enrolled in the Azure Active Directory. And what does it do? so those devices, those session hosts, will be visible and manageable via both your on-premise AD, so with GPOs, with your traditional settings and all the things we are very much used to, but also with the Azure AD as well. So in this first part I want to explain, okay, so how do we configure those session hosts to be hybrid AD joined, and the second part of my the session is about, okay, so how can we enroll those session hosts to Microsoft Intune, to Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So first, if we start with some requirements for the hybrid Azure AD join, we need to make sure we have Azure AD Connect. We have to sync some users, we have to sync the computers. So we need an organizational unit with our computer objects, and those must be synced to Azure AD. Of course, we need a domain controller, at least version 2008 R2. And one important thing is we can only use a single forest synced to one single Azure AD tenant. And like Sander mentioned before, if you want to use your images, as we call it, our golden image, that image cannot already be joined to Azure AD. If you did that already, there's one great command to leave that Azure AD, and that's this one. So to set up the Azure AD join, we need a few things. So first of all, those computer objects must know where they need to connect, to which Azure AD tenant and to which domain in the Azure AD they need to connect. We can do that multiple ways. What I'm going to show you is you can verify it via the AAD Connect configuration. Since one of the latest versions of AAD Connect, there is the possibility to configure that service connection point. And what it does, that service connection point will just point the computers in the right direction. So the service connection point will contain your Azure AD, your tenant name, and that's it. If you configure it with AAD Connect, it will be configured for your complete organization. So if you want to test it on just a few computers, if you're not already been using hybrid Azure AD join for your other computers, you can verify it via etc edit. In this case, you can search for the device registration configuration, and if you want to use more of a granular control for those computers you want to enroll in the Azure AD, you can just remove those settings, and you can configure a client-side registry setting. And basically, like I just told you, it's a tenant ID and a tenant name. So, as I mentioned before, we can configure it via AAD Connect. That's the complete process of getting that service connection point in your Active Directory. If you open up Azure AD Connect, you can go to configure device options. You can choose for the hybrid Azure AD join configuration part. Well, we can choose if we want to enroll Windows 10 or later, and the hybrid Azure AD join is also supported on down level domain joined devices. Keep in mind that if you want to use that second option, you have to make sure that a few URLs and some other stuff is being configured in your environment. Right after that step, there's the service connection point configuration. So you have to configure your forest, your authentication, and you have to provide an enterprise admin account. And this is also the part when you can just configure a PowerShell script, which will eventually do the same as the configuration in AAD Connect. So if you configured it all, we can just press configure, and it will create that service connection point in your environment. But what happens next? So in the requirements I already said it, that we need to configure the AAD Connect to synchronize your computer objects, in this case our session host, to Azure AD. So if you configure the service connection point via the registry or via AAD Connect, the next step, what will happen is the computer objects will be synced to Azure AD. It will happen at the next sync interval. I think the default one is the 30-minute interval. So keep in mind, if you enroll a session host and join it to the domain, it could take up 30 minutes, or you have to script something to force the synchronization to Azure AD. The session host will receive the GPO, where it is allowed to do that Azure AD join, and right after that there will be a scheduled task being created on that computer, on that session host, that will perform the join to Azure AD. And the next step, of course, the device will appear in your Azure Active Directory. You can see it from the Azure Active Directory as a join type with the hybrid Azure AD join, and probably when you go to the portal, it will be shown over there with the status pending, and in just a matter of seconds, minutes, it will go from the state pending to the registration time and date of that machine. So there was a very quick part on the hybrid Azure AD join. So here's a small video of it where we can see what's happening inside the Azure AD portal. So if we navigate to the Azure Active Directory, search for that device, you will see that it's been synchronized to the Azure AD. It's been already hybrid Azure AD joined. It's the state pending. And if we move forward a little, we will see that the status will change in registered. So that's it. It's quite easy. If you just follow those requirements, those steps, it will be quite easy to just let your session host be hybrid Azure AD joined. But like always, there's always some kind of troubleshooting and things you need to understand when it doesn't work the way as you expected. So what can happen? Well, what will happen is the event 306. The 306 event is just the event. You can search for it in the event viewer. You can go to Microsoft Windows and then the user device registration part of the event log. There will be all the events related to this process. If you see the event 306, it means, well, the enrollment or the domain join has been successfully. If you see a 304, that means that the computer object has not been synced yet to the Azure AD. So it's trying to look for the SCP. He found the SCP. He knows which tenant he must be knocking on the door, but that device with the device ID has not been synchronized yet to the Azure portal or to the Azure Active Directory. If it's been successful, just before that, you will also see a task being created. So if you go to schedule task, there is a task where it will perform all the magic and it will perform the hybrid Azure AD join. And if you want to know it from the client side, you can just use this command, so dsref cmd/status, and it will provide you all the information related to the hybrid Azure AD configuration. So on this screenshot you will see that this machine has been domain joined, but it's also being joined to the Azure AD. And now for the fun stuff, well, almost the fun stuff, but we are almost there. So now we got our session host enrolled into the Azure AD, but we also have to make sure that it's being automatically enrolled into Intune, because we want to manage our session host the modern way. So we want to manage it with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. We want to get rid of all our old group policy objects, and we want to move to new configuration profiles via Intune with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So one of the requirements is, well, of course, our session host must be joined to the on-premises domain, but also to the Azure domain. If our device, for whatever reason, has not been hybrid domain joined, the automatic enrollment in the Intune will not work. We also have to make sure that we configured the MDM service within Azure, and to configure the automatic enrollment into Intune, we also need to make sure that we have the latest administrative templates for Windows 10. We need to make sure that the latest, or at least this version of the virtual desktop agent has been installed, otherwise the enrollment will also fail. And like Sander already mentioned, well, single session but also multi-session is supported when enrolling into Intune this way. For this session we are only focusing on single session, so it's more of a persistent session host, but we can also use it for managing multi-sessions. There are of course some limitations. It's just a quick overview of the limitations I could find on the Microsoft documentation. So there are a few configuration items which are not available when you deploy a session host, so a virtual machine Windows 10 to Azure AD, and that's so the domain joiner and the Wi-Fi profiles are not available, and there are a few remote actions which, well, some are available but aren't supported by Microsoft. So how do we enroll that session host into Intune? Well, there's a GPO, so there's a group policy object for that one. If we want to configure this group policy object, we have to choose between two types of credentials, and let me quickly explain to you the difference and the difference in the behavior of those options. So first we got the user credentials, and I wrote a blog about this, and at that time I can only use user credentials because device credentials weren't working at that moment. So user credentials, what will happen is, as soon as the session host receives the group policy and a licensed user logged on to that machine, as soon as that licensed user logs on to that machine, those credentials will be used to automatically enroll that session host into Intune. But that's not what we want, because before a user logs on that session host, we want to make sure that the machine has already got all the configuration profiles, has been compliant, and all the configuration items has been applied to that session host. And that's where the device credentials come in. So with the device credential option, you can configure it like this. You just select device credentials, and as soon as the machine will receive this group policy, it will automatically start the process of enrolling the device into Intune. It's a little bit of a spoiler, so for those steps. So what happens next? So our session host will receive the MDM enrollment settings via GPO. Right after that, you will see some events on that session host, and the result is that there will be a scheduled task again, which will start the enrollment into to MDM, into Endpoint Manager, into Intune. If everything succeeds correctly, you will also see an event ID of 75, and 75 means the MDM enrollment has been completed. The device credentials are used in this case, and it's succeeded, and eventually the device will show up in the Azure portal. So here you will see the Endpoint Manager portal. You can navigate to it via endpoint.microsoft.com, and if you go to Windows devices, and well, it's not that fast, but you will see the events on the session host, and after some time you will also see those devices within Endpoint Manager. And this is where the very fun starts, and I will also give the stage to Sander, and Sander will explain to you, okay, so now we have two session hosts in Endpoint Manager. What can we do with Endpoint Manager to manage our session host with Intune, but also via the traditional way of using group policy objects? So Sander, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks Stefan for your good explanation about AD and Intune enrollment. Well, first to say, I was glad I won the task about to present the fun part. So next time we will turn around. Yeah, what we did, we built up a little lab to show. Well, the main goal is to show them the difference between managed and non-managed session hosts. So what we did is we have an on-premise domain controller with an AD sync to Azure AD. On the on-premise domain controller, we configured two groups for this particular situation: a group managed and a group non-managed. Those both groups are synced to Azure AD. Azure AD and Microsoft Endpoint Manager are talking to each other, so that's not the difficult part in this situation. In MEM, we have configured some policies. As you can see on the left side, we have configured three policies, one for some edge configuration, one for power settings, because we don't want to turn off those session hosts. For personal hosts, well, it's not that bad that users are shutting down some session hosts, but if people are on a multi-session, then I think other people will be mad when someone turns them out. So that's the reason for power settings, and we have created a security baseline. So that's the three policies we created. We have two session hosts, session host 1 and session host 0. The 0 one is connected to the managed group, and the non-managed is on session host 1. We also have configured two Azure Back to School users, Azure Back to School and Azure Back to School 2. So at the end, we are logging in with both users, so we are connected to a session host which belong to them, and then you can see the difference between the configuration. That's the 4 demos we have prepared. One about the group deployment, so how did we configure the groups in Azure AD. Demo 2 is we have created the policies which we like to show, and the other 2 demos are for the user login. So let's get started. Well, first is we have created the groups. As you can see, we have created 2 groups on the on-premise side. I call them Azure Back to School, and then the managed and non-managed. As you can see, they are synced to this Azure AD environment, and also the members are the 0 is for the managed Azure AD group, and the other session host is member of the non-managed. So that's the part where we split it up to show the managed versus non-managed. Well, that's the group part. It's very quick and easy. So we have configured local on the on-premise side groups, and the members are the session hosts. So couldn't be easier than that. Stephen, can you please go to the next slide?
So Sander, just to be sure, those groups are being synced from our on-premise domain controller to the Azure Active Directory, right?
That's correct. So you also are able to create some dynamic groups. For this situation, we didn't configure that. Well, for me, as an automation guy, I'm a bit lazy. So no, I don't want to put every single device in one group. So it has to be dynamically. Yes, there are options to create dynamic groups based on a prefix of a device name, or a particular device type, or OU or something. But it can take some while to when they are synced, and when the dynamic group is synced with all its devices. So that's the reason why I've chosen for this. If I can make a recommendation, I should configure some dynamic groups.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you want to use it, because like I mentioned before, if you synchronize those computer objects to Azure AD, and you want your users to log in like 5 minutes after the synchronization has been completed and those devices has been enrolled into Intune, and you have some configuration profiles attached to those devices via, well, a dynamic group. Well, it could take some time before that group is being populated with things like indeed the prefix of the session host. There's a new option in the Endpoint Manager where you could choose some filters. So you can also filter like Windows 10 multi-session to be included or excluded in some configuration profiles. But the quick way to be sure that at the moment that you deploy that session host is to make sure that machine has already been a member of that group.
Yeah, totally agree. So it really depends. If you're what Stefan mentioned is if you need a session host now at this moment at the middle of the day because 15 people are coming in and the session hosts are full or you don't have enough. It's definitely a good thing to do. If you are configuring a whole environment in the middle of the night, then timing isn't that issue. So, well, it really depends.
Yeah.
Okay.
And otherwise, you can always automate things like checks to, before you are allowing users on the session host. You can check if it's a member of a dynamic group, if that group's being populated, if those policies being applied, etc., etc. So let's get to the next demo, Sunday.
Yeah, fine. Oh, this is the groups. Okay, the edge configuration. Yeah, what I did, I configured a really quite simple policy for some edge configuration. As you can see, I go into the configuration profiles. I select device type Windows 10 and later, and I choose the settings catalog, which is in preview, which works quite well. As you can see, I'm a quick typer.
Windows 10 and later. That also means Windows 11.
Yep.
Cool.
And then I add some settings. There are a lot of settings. So what I did is I selected only the settings which are available and working for me as an AVD environment. So I choose the enterprise multi-session. And what MEM is doing now is querying all the policies which are available for me for this particular situation. I'm looking for Edge because it folds everything out, so it's a quite long list. And I click on search. Don't forget that because it won't do anything without a search hit. So I really was waiting why did not anything happen, but I had to click seriously. So. What I did, just a small test. I selected startup and homepage. So I said what Edge need to do when it's starting, what it had to fill in as a URL when a new tab is coming. Also, like we all work from home, so I like to say the home button is quite useful. And then I have to configure it. Well, I really like myself, so I put my website in it. And I have quite some options. I choose open a new tab, and that's it. Then the groups. For now, I will choose the managed group, of course. And that's what you see in all the demos. Also always selecting the managed group. So not managed isn't do anything. And what Stefan mentioned, yeah, there's a filter in it. So you can also create a group of all the devices and then select a filter for only special AVD hosts. And yeah, well, that's it. That's the edge settings. And I must say, when the device is syncing with Intune, you really see the difference live when you're logged in. I've tested a device where I logged in without any policy, and after that I pushed the Edge settings and I restarted Edge and the policy was active. And yeah, that was very nice.
Yeah, and this is also the reason why you should be using the device credentials, because if you're deploying those edge settings on a device level, as soon as this device has been enrolled into Intune, it will automatically pick up those configurations. It's like a traditional group policy, like the computer settings, which will be applied right after the boot of the machine. Well, in this case, as soon as the Intune enrollment has been completed, the Intune extensions, all those things has been installed on that machine, it will also push that configuration profile to that device. If you will use things like the user credential, if the user logs in, it will probably take some time before those settings will be applied to the session host, and in the meantime, well, the user got a like non-configured session host. Let's go to the next demo then.
Yep, the power settings. Yes. Well, I've started on the same page, so we're going to devices again. Configuration profiles, of course. Oh, well, edge settings is there already. Windows 10, of course, settings catalog, and we're going to the power settings. Also giving them a name which represents the thing what it does. And there we go again. I also added the filter again.
It's quite handy, that filter.
Yeah, it took a while to get all the settings above. And then I have to scroll a little bit down for the power settings.
Next time you can also search
also
for it.
Yeah. Well, I was searching for power, and I found some power settings, but not what I needed.
Not the one in the start menu.
Yeah, exactly that. So next time I really start searching for the start menu. Now, well, as you can see, I don't like to put them on sleep, shutdown, restart, and hibernate. Yeah, for personal, yes, of course it will fit. But if you have a multi-session, well, I think some colleagues will be angry at you when you're doing that. Yeah, maybe probably for the Friday afternoon or something. But okay, that's the second policy created. If you like to test or something, if you like to test a session host before deploying it to the whole environment, yeah, what I do is what I did sometimes in preparing this demo is going to the particular device and then put the sync button, so I don't have to wait to get all the when the whole session is ready at all. After all,
so the sync button is like a GP update.
Yeah.
Porsche.
Yep.
Cool.
That's correct. And I must say it's really quick. It's really a minute or so. So it's working quite fast.
Cool.
Okay. The security baseline.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Well, it's not a configuration policy, so I have to go to endpoint security. And over there are some predefined baselines. Windows 365 is already there. I took that one for this situation. This endpoint security policy or baseline is a pre-configured baseline with the SIS security standards, and it's provided by Microsoft. There are a lot of options in it. For now, I always everything I kept default. I'm just browsing it now to see what's in there, and there are really a lot of options. So yeah, probably I say I'm not that security guy expert, but I think well, if you left this as default, I think you really are you're probably set for well 80-90%. Well, again, to the managed group. And I was a bit speaking forward a minute ago, but I think I go to sync now, or was that other demo? No. Okay. Well, what I did in a previous demo was go to the device and I hit the sync button. So if there is a security breach or something and you forgot to set the security baseline to the correct group, then the sync button could be a lifesaver.
Well, to check what's wrong, or well, compliance policies and that stuff.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, and then we're going to the real desktop. Going to rdweb.dvd, not AVD yet, URL, and I log in with the Azure Back to School account. That's the one within the managed group. Oh, well, the session host which belongs to him is in the managed group, so it's not user dependent, it's device dependent. But just the purview. Sorry?
Oh no, I was just saying our secret, super secret password.
Oh yeah. Well, we already removed the user, so
we need to log on again.
Yeah, not single sign-on, not configured yet, but it's there. So, and there's the desktop. Starting Microsoft Edge, and as you can see, my page is loaded. Also, when I create a new tab, my page is there. So I'm always there. So you can't leave me anymore.
Well, and those settings are all being managed via Endpoint Manager. So the configuration profiles, you just explain this setting is based on those configurations and will be pushed via Intune.
As you can see, the power settings are gone. You only have the disconnect button, so you're not able to shut down or something. Well, checking the firewall, it's running, of course. And a final check to show on which machines we are. Okay, now well, the PowerShell is also the blocking the admin system. That's the security baseline. And at last, the hostname check, and that's the 01, and that's the one which is a member of the managed group. So this is a fully managed desktop environment, the modern way from Intune, with some basic policies on it.
Cool.
That's the demo for managed. And of course we have also a non-managed environment. I skipped the login this time, but it's really the Azure Back to School 2 user. I'll show it over there.
So this user has been assigned another session host.
Yep.
And that session host isn't being managed by Intune, but is hybrid domain joined, has been enrolled into Intune,
Yep.
but is being managed like the traditional way via group policies on our on-premises domain controller.
Yep. So in our lab environment, we don't have any group policies active on the on-premise side, so it's just a new desktop without any configuration. Well, it took some while to get logged in, but finally we're there. Okay. Well, starting Edge again. And this is the first thing where you see it's not configured at all, because we have to configure Edge from the beginning. So it will take some setup time. Well, as you can see, there's no home button, and so we're not going home yet. And the tabs are empty. Go to Google or something, then that's fine, of course. But if you create a new tab, it's empty again. So I think this is the most luckiest guy, because it's not related to me or my website. So. And over there, well, you see the power settings, they're all there. So I also can update the machine. Well, that's not a situation you like in a multi-session environment, and actually also not in a personal environment. Well, I've started the admin session. Well, it's asking for credentials. I'm not filling in right now, and at last the normal Powershell session. And I'm also checking there the host name again. And then you will see it's the other session host. The first one was the 0, and this is the 1.
Cool.
So this one is fully blank, new, and non-managed. And well, the most fun part of this is when you move this session host into the managed group, it will take, well, a few minutes, and the whole machine is configured again, and then it's the machine you like. So.
Yep. Let me quickly check. Okay.
Well, that were the demos for now.
Yeah. Well, for the last few days and last few weeks, we've played a lot with the enrollment into Intune, and well, what we found out is, well, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, or is workish.
It should be work better.
Yeah. So what we saw on the Microsoft documentation page are a few known issues, and well, a few of them, well, mostly the first one is very important. So the issue is user policies does not sync after the initial login to the hybrid Azure AD joint single session VM. And well, indeed, sometimes if you log in the first time on that session host, those user policies will not apply. And at this moment, the only workaround is to log off and to log in again. And probably the other ones we couldn't test. We are not using a lot of modern apps with FS Logic, and we only have one MDM provider, and that's Intune. So for our physical and our virtual machines, and so that's it with known issues. And well, we started this session with a few things what we wanted you to learn. We did we said a few things about Azure Virtual Desktop, what it is. It's a cloud service for providing like apps and desktop virtualization. I spoke about the Azure Hybrid Domain Join. I didn't talk about all the advantages of the hybrid domain join, but strictly talked about, okay, so how can you deploy your session host to the Azure AD. We talked about the enrollment into Intune. What do you need? Some requirements. How can you check it? What events you will see? What task will be created when it's going to happen? And Sander showed you some basic settings on those session hosts, how you can create them. Well, the edge policies, the power policy, the power settings policies, the security baseline, and how you can apply them in this case to our session host. Yeah, well, we know it's just the basics. Well, it's the Azure Back to School month, so we've all been on holiday. So we thought, well, we started little slow, just the basics, but we are definitely planning on doing some more deep dives in all the different configuration settings in Intune, Windows Update for Business, security baselines, filtering, Windows Defender, you name it.
Automation, of course.
And of course the automation. Yeah, yeah. So keep an eye on those sessions. But for now, if you are excited on trying those new things, well, we will share the presentation, of course. But well, there's a lot of documentation on the Microsoft documentation website. How you can start with the Azure Hybrid Domain Join, the enrollment, configuration profile, security baselines, all that stuff is being mentioned on the Microsoft documentation. There's also a Microsoft Learn portal. There are a few courses where you can go to for free, and you can start learning all the concepts and all the interesting part of AVD, of WVD. No, it's AVD. Sorry. Yeah, well, like mentioned before, we both have our blogs. Sander is more focusing on the automation part of it, and well, I will be more focusing on the endpoint Intune part of it. The complete process of the hybrid domain join, the enrollment into Intune, is already on my blog, and Sander already got some cool blog items on this website about automation. And of course there's the AVD community. So if you want to learn more, if you want to get in contact with others, feel free to visit the avdcommunity.com. We also got our own Slack channel where you can just drop in some questions. There are people from Microsoft on it who will answer them, or well, probably there are a lot of people who will answer to you. And I think that's it, Sander.
Yeah, good talk, I think.
So
we had a thank you slide, yes.
Yep.
Well, thank you for at least thanks Dwayne for having us to give us a stage to present our knowledge about AVD and managing the modern way. Well, our socials are under the thank you guy. So if you'd like to learn more about getting involved with AVD, if you have any questions or don't know what to start or something, or you need more extra information, you can always contact us, and we always like to help you a little further in the world of AVD and managing them.
Definitely. So for now, thank you all for watching this session. If you have any feedback for us, please feel free to contact us, like Sander said, and well, we will see you virtually again.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye bye.